far beyond the busy centers of the galaxy, where stars seemed few and silent. The starship Vigilant floated weakly through the dark void. It was not supposed to be here, drifting helplessly after a fierce encounter with unknown space debris that had ripped through its engines and left it crippled. The crew was exhausted, their hope fading as the life support systems worked harder to keep them alive. Captain Alina Merrick stood on the bridge, her eyes scanning the endless black beyond the ship's thick glass. Every system had been pushed to the limit. The once proud patrol vessel had become a fragile shell, and the vast emptiness around them made their situation feel even more desperate. The Vigilant had one final hope: to send out an SOS signal. A distress call meant to reach the nearest allied species friends who had stood by them during countless battles and crises. But this time fate seemed to have other plans. As the signal was sent into the void, cosmic interference from a sudden burst of radiation scrambled the message. Instead of reaching the intended recipients, the call drifted across the stars and landed far off course, its encrypted code bouncing through space until it found the attention of the Deathworlders, a species known across multiple systems as relentless warriors shaped by the harshest environments imaginable. The Deathworlders were not the kind of saviors anyone expected. They lived on a planet where survival was a daily battle against nature itself, where only the strongest thrived, and their technology reflected that brutal reality designed not just for defense, but for overwhelming attack. When the distorted SOS signal finally reached them, their leaders gathered quickly, intrigued by the strange call. No species had sent such a signal their way before, at least not in their history. The Deathworlders debated whether this was a trap, a challenge, or perhaps an opportunity to extend their influence beyond their own star system. Their society, built on strength and honor, saw calls for help as chances to prove their power and protect those they deemed worthy. Some saw it as a moment to test their firepower, others as a chance to rescue and gain new allies. The decision was swift: they would answer the call, but not with hesitation or mercy as others might. The Deathworlder fleet readied itself, massive ships bristling with weaponry, unlike anything the humans aboard the Vigilant had ever encountered. Meanwhile, the humans remained unaware that their desperate call was heading into unknown territory. Inside the cramped corridors of the ship, every crew member prepared for the worst. Systems flickered under the strain, alarms occasionally blaring to remind them of the fragile balance keeping them alive. Captain Merrick tried to keep her crew focused, but doubts gnawed at her. What if no one came? What if this was the end? The void outside seemed endless, filled only with cold stars and silence.
Oh.
But then sensors picked up the approach of massive ships, their energy signatures unlike any human vessel. Panic and hope mixed as the crew struggled to understand whether these newcomers were friend or foe. Out the Deathworlders arrived with a display of power that shook the Vigilant's very hull, sending waves of vibration through the damaged ship. Their communications crackled, broken and strange to human ears. But the message was clear. They had come to answer the SOS, though their manner was raw and fierce, not gentle or cautious. As the Deathworlders boarded the Vigilant, their towering forms and rugged armor made the crew uneasy. Their expressions were hard to read stern, but not outright hostile. The Deathworlders spoke of survival, strength, and honor, concepts that seemed harsh but strangely familiar to the humans, who had been fighting their own battle just to stay alive. In the following hours, the Deathworlders began repairs, using advanced technology that seemed almost savage in its efficiency. They moved quickly, wielding tools and machines that could either heal or destroy. The Vigilant crew watched with a mix of fear and fascination, realizing that these warriors were not just fighters, they were survivors. Molded by a planet where only the fiercest endured, yet the questions remained. Why had the Deathworlders chosen to help? Was it simply a test of their might? Or was there a deeper reason behind their arrival? Captain Merrick sensed a larger game unfolding beyond her understanding. Yes, the silence of space was no longer empty. It was charged with the tension of unknown alliances, and the uncertain promise that this unexpected rescue might change everything for the humans and perhaps for the Deathworlders as well. As the Vigilant slowly regained power, the crew braced themselves for whatever would come next. Caught between relief and the growing sense that their lives had been pulled into a story far bigger than any of them had imagined. The Vigilant was barely holding together, drifting deeper into the silent void where stars flickered like distant candles. The crew, exhausted and worn, had begun to lose hope that rescue would come at all. Systems failed one by one, alarms became a steady hum, and the cold threat of death loomed ever closer. Then, without warning, the sensors blared with the arrival of something massive, something they could scarcely comprehend. From the dark reaches of space, a fleet of Deathworlder warships emerged like thunder rolling across a quiet sky. The ships were enormous, angular, and intimidating, their hulls scarred from countless battles, yet gleaming with deadly precision. The sheer force of their arrival sent shockwaves through the Vigilant, rattling the already fragile vessel and igniting a mixture of fear and awe among the crew. But instead of firing weapons or demanding surrender, the Deathworlders did something unexpected. They offered aid. It was a moment so strange that for a heartbeat, no one on the Vigilant dared to believe it. The crew watched as strange vessels moved closer, deploying smaller craft that docked smoothly and silently with the damaged ship. The humans prepared for attack, weapons raised and hearts pounding, only to be met by silence and action focused entirely on repairs. The Deathworlders boarded with a presence that was both fierce and disciplined. Their towering forms wrapped in battle-worn armor that carried the marks of countless battles and harsh environments. Their eyes were sharp, their expressions unreadable, blending suspicion with a quiet respect. They spoke in a guttural language that crackled through the Vigilant's translators, offering terse words that carried meaning beyond mere phrases, words about strength, survival, and the unforgiving nature of the universe. These visitors were not saviors in the way the humans expected, but they were not enemies either. Their culture was built on the idea that weakness could not be tolerated, and that survival was a victory all on its own. Yet here they were, dedicating their power and technology to restore a vessel of a species so different, a species they barely understood. The humans watched as the Deathworlders worked quickly and efficiently, their advanced tools cutting through damaged plating and rewiring circuits with a brutal elegance. The technology was strange and alien machines that seemed crude at first glance but performed with unmatchable precision. Sparks flew and metal groaned as the ship slowly came back to life under the Deathworlders' hands. Captain Elena Merrick stood on the bridge, torn between gratitude and caution. She knew this rescue was no ordinary gesture. These warriors who had answered the SOS had their own reasons, hidden beneath layers of culture and survival instinct. Was this help a simple act of honor, or was there something more dangerous lurking beneath the surface? As the power systems began humming steadily again, the captain could feel the weight of unseen eyes on her crew, watchful, assessing, calculating. The Deathworlders moved through the ship like predators with purpose, testing, probing, and ensuring that no hidden threats remained. Their presence was both a shield and a challenge, reminding the humans that while they owed their lives to these strangers, trust was earned through strength. Tension hung in the recycled air of the Vigilant, thick and unspoken. The crew exchanged nervous glances, unsure whether to welcome these fierce saviors or prepare for a fight they barely understood. Outside, the stars continued to burn cold and distant, indifferent to the fragile alliance forming in their midst. Despite the uncertainty, one thing became clear. The Deathworlders had changed the course of this mission in a way no one aboard the Vigilant could have imagined. Where once there was only despair, now flickered the faintest glimmer of hope, hope forged not in gentle hands, but in the fire of warriors who knew the true price of survival. Captain Merrick stared out into the darkness, realizing that this unexpected rescue might be the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with danger and power beyond anything she had known. The Deathworlders had arrived with firepower, but perhaps, just perhaps, they also brought something even more valuable, a chance to endure against impossible odds. As the Deathworlders continued their work on the Vigilant, the humans began to understand that their rescuers were shaped by a world unlike any they had ever known, a planet so harsh it had earned the name Deathworld from the galaxies. Explorers. This was no place for the weak or unprepared, the Deathworlders explained. through rough translations and actions more than words. That their home was a place where storms could rip mountains apart, where predators far larger and deadlier than anything in human history roamed the vast wild lands, and where survival depended on constant vigilance and strength. The Vigilance crew listened with a mixture of disbelief and respect as the Deathworlders described their world, a place where only those who could adapt quickly and fight hard lived to see another day. The stories were brutal, filled with loss and struggle, but also with moments of triumph born from sheer willpower. As repairs progressed, the Deathworlders did not just work on the ship, they began to train the humans themselves. What started as simple demonstrations of skill quickly turned into intense lessons in survival and combat. The crew was pushed beyond what they thought possible. Physical drills, tactical exercises, and harsh tests of endurance became daily routines. Captain Merrick watched as her people, used to the order and predictability of human military life, struggled with the raw, primal nature of Deathworlder training. It was unforgiving and relentless, designed to prepare warriors for a world that demanded absolute readiness at all times. Yet, despite the difficulty, something shifted within the humans. They began to grasp the deeper meaning behind the Deathworlders, weighs the importance of resilience, the power of strategy rooted in experience, and the strength that comes from unity against overwhelming odds. The Deathworlders taught them to read the environment, to anticipate threats not just from enemies but from nature itself, and to rely on one another with fierce loyalty. But this brutal education was not without its challenges. Surfaced frequently, humans' need for explanation clashed with the Deathworlders' preference for action over words. Simple gestures sometimes caused offense, and differences in communication created tension. The humans, trained in diplomacy and procedure, found the Deathworlders' directness both shocking and frustrating. Meanwhile, the Deathworlders saw the humans' caution and hesitation as weakness. Despite these clashes, a slow, uneasy respect grew between the two groups. Captain Merrick realized that survival in the vast universe required more than technology and firepower, demanded adaptability and the courage to face the unknown with strength and purpose. The lessons of the Deathworlders were harsh, but necessary, and the Vigilance crew found themselves changed not just in skill but in spirit. As days turned into weeks, the ship was repaired. But the true transformation happened within the hearts of those who had answered a call for help, and found themselves immersed in a world where only the toughest could thrive. The silent void of space outside was no longer a symbol of isolation, but a reminder of the relentless challenge that lay ahead. And the unexpected bond formed between two very different species, united by the will to survive and fight another. Just as the Vigilance systems hummed steadily with renewed life, and the last repairs were being made under the sharp eyes of the Deathworlders, a sudden alert shattered the fragile calm aboard the ship. Long-range sensors detected an approaching fleet, but this was no ordinary arrival. The ships that pierced the void were unfamiliar, sleek, deadly, and radiating aggression. The invading species, known across several star systems as relentless conquerors, had set their sights on this region with one goal: domination. They were merciless in their expansion, sweeping through territories with overwhelming force and crushing any resistance without mercy. The humans and Deathworlders, once strangers brought together by an accidental SOS, now faced a test far more dangerous than any of them had imagined. The Deathworlders' warships, still present in the system, immediately assumed battle formations. Their weapons, vast and terrifying, blinked to life, filling the darkness with glowing, lethal energy. The humans, standing beside their fierce allies, prepared their own defenses with a mixture of fear and determination. Captain Elena Merrick moved through her crew with calm urgency, knowing that this fight could decide the fate of both species, and perhaps the entire region. The enemy did not wait. With brutal efficiency, the invading fleet launched a massive assault, bombarding the area with waves of precision strikes. The Vigilant and Deathworlder ships shook under the pressure, shields flaring and weapons firing in a deadly dance of survival. The battle was unlike anything the humans had faced before. The Deathworlders' raw firepower was awe-inspiring. Vast cannons fired bursts that tore through enemy armor like paper, while smaller, agile fighters darted through the chaos with deadly precision. Yet the humans contributed more than just firepower. Using their knowledge of tactics, technology, and teamwork, they coordinated strikes, hacked enemy systems, and adapted quickly to shifting battle conditions. The alliance between the two species was raw and untested, but it was forged in necessity and the fierce will to survive. As the battle raged, every moment was filled with tension. The Vigilance crew, trained now in Deathworlder survival skills, pushed their bodies and minds beyond limits they never thought possible. Each decision, each action, had consequences that rippled across the battlefield. The enemy was relentless, adapting to the combined tactics of humans and Deathworlders with chilling speed. But the defenders responded with equal determination, their combined strength turning what might have been a swift defeat into a desperate fight for survival. Explosions lit the dark expanse, debris scattered like deadly stars, and silence between bursts of gunfire was a fragile reminder of what was at stake. Captain Merrick's voice remained steady, her commands clear, even as fear gnawed at her insides. The Deathworlder commanders communicated with harsh efficiency, their strategic minds honed by a world where every mistake meant death. Slowly, the tide of battle began to shift. The humans' creativity in using limited resources and the Deathworlders' overwhelming force combined in ways neither side had expected. Together, they found new openings, exploiting weaknesses in the enemy's formation. It became clear that this fight was about more than survival. It was a statement. The Deathworlders were proving that their brutal ways forged strength unmatched in the galaxy, and the humans were showing that ingenuity and unity could stand alongside raw power. Yet even in victory, the cost was high. Ships were lost, and many brave lives were sacrificed in the struggle. But as the enemy fleet was driven back, retreating into the darkness from which they had come, a new understanding settled over the survivors. This battle had forged a bond between two species that had once been worlds apart. A bond born in fire and tested by the cruel reality of space warfare. The stars outside no longer seemed indifferent, but watched silently as a new chapter began. One where strength was found not just in power alone, but in the unity of those willing to fight together against the darkest threats the universe could bring. The battle that had stretched across space now reached its peak. With the combined forces of humans and Deathworlders standing shoulder to shoulder, their weapons blazing in a fierce chorus of firepower that lit up the cold darkness like a blazing star. The vigilant crew, once fragile and desperate, had been transformed under the Deathworlders' harsh guidance into warriors hardened by lessons of survival and combat. Their eyes, once filled with uncertainty, now burned with determination and an unspoken bond with their once-unknown rescuers. Together, they formed a force unlike any other, an alliance born not from choice, but necessity, tempered in the furnace of battle and sealed by shared struggle. As enemy ships advanced, expecting to sweep aside what they saw as a divided and weak defense, they instead found themselves facing an unbreakable wall of fire and strategy. The Deathworlders' raw strength and superior weaponry, combined with human creativity and tactical skill, created a deadly synergy. Every blast from a Deathworlder cannon was supported by a calculated human strike. Every human maneuver was protected by the unwavering might of their brutal allies. The battlefield became a dance of destruction and survival, where every decision could mean the difference between life and death, victory and defeat. Captain Alina Merrick, standing firm on the bridge of the Vigilant, felt a surge of pride and awe as she watched her crew fight not just for survival, but for something greater, a future where the universe might recognize them as a force to be reckoned with. The fierce determination in the Deathworlders' eyes reflected her own resolve. They were no longer simply rescuers or strangers, they were comrades in arms, bound by respect earned in the crucible of war. As the battle pressed on, the enemy's forces began to falter under the relentless assault. Their numbers dwindled, their confidence shaken by the unexpected unity and firepower they faced. One by one, enemy ships exploded in brilliant bursts, of light there remained scattered across the void as warnings to those who might challenge this new alliance. Yet victory was not without sacrifice. The Vigilant carried scars from the fight, and its crew mourned the loss of brave souls who had given everything to protect their home and newfound allies. The weight of these losses settled heavily on the survivors, but it also steeled their resolve. They knew the cost of weakness, and now they understood the true power of standing together. When the last enemy ship retreated, the silence that followed was not empty, but filled with the heavy breath of hard-won peace. The stars, distant and cold, seemed to shine a little brighter as if acknowledging the strength born in this moment. Captain Merrick looked out at the vastness of space. No longer a lonely void, but a place where bonds were forged and destinies rewritten. The SOS that had been sent out in desperation had reached the wrong species, but in doing so, it had summoned the fiercest protectors the galaxy had ever seen. The Deathworlders and humans, once strangers from vastly different worlds, now shared a future defined by firepower and unity. This alliance would change the balance of power, sending a clear message throughout the galaxy: when strength and strategy combine, even the darkest threats can be overcome. As repairs on the Vigilant began anew, not just on the ship but on the wounded spirits of its crew, a new chapter opened, one filled with hope. Challenges and the unbreakable bond forged in the heat of battle. The universe was vast, filled with unknown dangers, but now there was a force ready to meet whatever came next, united and stronger than ever before.